Hey guys, this is Shane, aka Echo Soundworks, and you are checking out a production tip and trick tutorial video. So in this video, I'm going to be diving into one of the sessions from the demo to our newest sound pack, Chainsmoking Volume 1, and show you how the drop came together, because I got a bunch of questions after the release of the pack asking how I got the sound of this drop. And the simplest explanation for those questions is it's basically just a giant sidechain orgy. Everything's sidechain to itself. So with that being said, let's check out this drop. All right, so there it is. It's not necessarily exactly like a Chainsmokers drop per se. It's more like an Illenium remix of a Chainsmokers track. He did a remix of their Don't Let Me Down. He also did a Flume Tuvlo remix that's very similar. So it's this big drop with saw chords, and the kick is just really large. The kick and snare kind of like pop out of the mix, right? So let's look at how this drop came together. Now, it's a few parts mixing and a few parts arrangement. You kind of got to be aware of where you place your kicks. Snares are pretty much always going to be in the same spot. But the kick, you want a fairly open kick pattern. For instance, if we just solo the kicks here for a few bars and play it with the snares maybe, you'll notice that the kicks are really basic. So it's literally just all on the downbeat of each bar, except for this one kick right here. Like, it's literally just boom, k, boom, k, right? But that makes you have the option, it affords you the option to get more creative with the chords in your drop, okay? If it was like a really busy kick pattern, it'd be really hard to get the sound like this. So speaking of the snares real quick, I just want to touch on this. It's not necessarily to get the sound of the drop, but it's a cool tip and trick. With a really basic kick pattern or kick and snare pattern like this, it's kind of cool to vary up your snare hits. So listen to it. This first snare chunk right here is different than this one. And you can see that these samples are just layered together. Right? And it just goes back and forth. So it's one thing that you can do to kind of spice up admittedly a pretty basic kick and snare pattern. But that kick and snare pattern becomes really important when you try to get the chords into your drop. So one of the things you want to be aware of is anytime a kick or snare is hitting, you want to make sure that one of two things are happening. There's space with your chords in that section where either the kick or a snare, or if there is a section where the snare is hitting or the kick is hitting and the chord is at the same time, you're going to need to make sure that you have some side chaining occurring to kind of duck that out of the way. So let's go down to, right here, we're down in the actual chord tracks here. And I know that all my kicks happen at 25, 26, 27, 28, the downs. So I can see here at bar 25, there's going to be some competition in the mix. Bar 26, not so much, maybe just with the release. 27, again, right on the down, going to be competing. So the first thing you want to do is obviously cut out the competing frequencies, which would be the low frequencies. So on all these tracks, I've pretty much cut out everything from 200 hertz down with a basic equalizer. Now the next thing you want to do is you want to start side chaining. So on this track right here, I loaded up a compressor and I put the sidechain input to the kick. So every time the kick hits, it's going to lower the volume of this track here. And I'll pull it up and play it as you can see it. Now, the cool thing about this is the kick at 26 isn't actually cutting off the beginning of the transient of one of the chords. It's actually kind of like ducking out the volume of the end of it, the release. And that's what's actually really cool about this, is it creates this kind of like weird rhythmic vibe with your chords that you wouldn't get with just like the LFO tool or something like that. So that sidechain compression, if we go down to the second chord track here, is occurring as well. I have set the trigger input to the kick. And then on this one down here, if we look at it, this one's not actually tied to the kick. And that's why I said earlier, this is kind of like an orgy of sidechain. It's a bunch of sidechain, and it's all happening a little bit differently, right? Like you would think that I would have had the exact same sidechain inputs and settings on both these tracks, but not so. So this track right here, this specific one is being sidechained. The sidechain input is set to these vocal drops. right? So that's going to kind of duck out of certain elements of the mix a little bit differently and at different times as opposed to these other two. Now, the reason why I did that is because these are pan left and right, and there's not a lot of low frequency in them. Right, so they're not going to compete with the kick and the snare a whole hell of a lot. Right, because they're not occupying the same space or the same frequencies for the most part. So that's why I got a little bit creative with the sidechain compression and the inputs that were triggering the sidechaining. Now, speaking to that though, all three of these chord instruments, they are grouped to what's called a track stack in Logic. If you're not a Logic user, you will be like, what the hell's that? If you're a Logic user, you'll know. So for those out there who don't use Logic, it's kind of like taking a block of instruments, like maybe all your chords, leads, vocals, whatever, and assigning it to one aux or bus output. So basically, all these tracks here in this little drop-down arrow are being routed to this output. Now, on this output, I have sidechain compressed again, but with different settings and even with different algorithms. So for instance, I have set this one to the kick. So the two of these tracks are being sidechain compressed but triggered from the kick 3 different times. Then this one right here, the second compressor, is actually, is it the first one or second one? This third one. The third one is actually tied to the snare. So now this whole group, every time the snare hits, it's going to duck the volume as well. So all in all, just on these chords, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 instances of sidechain compression. And they're all set a little bit differently. So it's not like everything's just copied and pasted. And some of them are being triggered from the kick, some are snare, and some are the vocal chops. That's what got that really cool syncopated big sound. Now, I did do one more thing with this main track here, the one that's in the center. I opened up a automation lane and just set it to pan. And every time there's a hit that's happening with the kick, I just move it out of the way a little. So you can see here, right on this down, it goes to the left, it goes to the right. Now, in isolation, you can hear it a little bit. But in the scheme of the mix, you can't. But it gives it that much more room for the kick to kind of breathe and pop out of the mix. So that's really what's going on with those chord tracks. Nothing too crazy. It's just a little bit interesting to kind of have multiple. It's like a layered cake of sidechain compression. Now let's go down to the basses, because the bass tracks are also sidechain compressed as well. So we have a subtrack here, and this is being triggered. Or the sidechain is being triggered by the kick. So every time the kick hits, it's going to duck it out of the way. Now, the more interesting one here is this kind of like mid bass, top bass section from Serum, and there's some sidechaining occurring from the kick as well as the snare. So let's solo those with it, because there's a lot of hits with that bass, right? It's happening quite a bit. So let's check it out, and we'll open up the compressors as we do. So here they are. Right, so you have probably about 7 or 8 instances of sidechain happening to make this drop have the feeling that it does. Now, there might even be more. There's probably actually 10, because I have the chops being sidechain compressed being to the kick and the snare as well. So just a lot of sidechain compression gets the trick done, as well as some careful planning with arrangement and a little bit of panning. If you guys have any questions or comments, let me know below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Like I said in the beginning of the video, I am Echo Soundworks. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.